Hi, hello, my name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be going over my February wrap up, and I will say you're about to pop into slightly past Elise because originally this video was going to be paired up with my January wrap up, but the video ended up being an hour long, so I need to separate them. So you're gonna get put in really quickly, and that's because originally this was tied to something else. So here I am, checking in, doing a little bit of an intro for you, and I hope you enjoy the books. Now we're gonna move into the February books, and hopefully I don't lose my voice. I already feel it happening a little bit, so I'll try to be quick. The first book that I read in February, and this is actually good because this is case study. So this was the book I was supposed to read in January. It was my book haul revisit book that I picked from December, so I need to read it in January. And I read most of it in January, but I finished it on in the beginning of February. So I did read it, just got finished a little bit later, and I loved this book. So good. So case study by Graeme, McRae, Burnett. This is published by Biblioasis. And this was actually nominated for, or longlisted for the Booker a few years ago in 2022. This book is about a woman, what's her name? What is her actual name? Okay, so I can't remember her actual name, but she goes by this alter ego named Rebecca Smith, and her sister has died. She commits suicide, and our narrator becomes convinced that the psychotherapist that her sister was seeing contributed to her committing suicide, and she holds him responsible. So she decides to go undercover and start seeing him as a client under the name Rebecca Smith in order to figure out if he is really responsible or not. That's the premise. This book was so twisted, and I loved it. Oh my gosh, I loved it so much. It's told in a journal type of format. So you're getting a mix of journals that the woman herself is keeping, and then also articles about the psychotherapist. This book was so compelling. I couldn't put it down. I was always excited to pick it back up again. It was a dive into a mind that was so unique and fascinating. I don't want to tell you more because I don't want to give anything away. But yeah, it's struggling with this idea of what is the truth? What is the truth? What is sanity at the end of the day? These big constructs that we have a general idea of, but what are the specifics of that? How do we know for sure? Very fascinating questions to get to ask, and I loved it. So I would highly recommend this. I definitely want to pick up something else by the author. I know his Bloody Project is one that he's really famous for, so I want to pick that up as well. But yeah, loved it. Next up, we have Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is published by Vintage. Now, I'm prepping you for an unpopular opinion. Don't be mad at me. I was disappointed in this. I know, oh my gosh. Okay, so I read this as a buddy read with my friend Kat, who actually had a similar experience to me, I think. This is about Agnes and her family. She's married to Shakespeare. Their son, Hamnet, contracts the plague. And that's kind of a part of it, but it's not, I don't know. It's about Agnes and her experience of grief, but also she is a woman not like other women. So it has a little bit of the not like other girls type of vibe. And she is, something to behold. I don't mean by her looks necessarily, but by her presence. So she has this ability to be able to see things through objects, to be able to almost intuit or foretell things when touching someone. Yeah, she's a really fascinating character. Honestly, Agnes was the best part about this book, but I felt an emotional distance from this book that I don't think I was supposed to feel. So many people talk about this book and say like the representation of grief is so profound and very moving. I did not have that experience of it. I'm not sure why. The structure of the book, I feel like, was part of that. I don't feel like it followed a traditional arc of like having the climax towards the end. And then the final scene, which I'm not going to talk about what it is, but I think you were meant to feel something there. I felt nothing. I felt nothing about that final scene. I'm not sure why it was the final scene. So yeah, I just kept going in and out of like, okay, the writing is good. The characters are interesting as a concept, but I don't feel like it all came together in the package that I was wanting or expecting. And I think that's okay. This might just not be for me, and that's fine, because obviously a lot of other people loved it. But I was just so surprised that my experience of it felt very different to what I've heard a lot of other people talk about, and it just felt so about this in the end. I didn't really have a desire to pick it back up most of the time, but did it anyway. And yeah, I loved Agnes. I could have done it with it just being about her and never being about anyone else. Please tell me if you had a similar experience to me about this and why you think that might be, because it just didn't work for me. But I did enjoy the writing. I would definitely read from Maggie O'Farrell again. Okay, next up we have Lodgeman. This is by Ebru Ocean, and it's translated by Celine Goksasu from the Kurdish. And this is about a family that's living in a lodgeman, which is like a kind of cabin-like structure out in a desolate small village in the mountains of Turkey. So very snowy, very harsh weather. And I would say the book is all around harsh. The atmosphere is harsh, the characters are harsh, the living conditions are harsh. Everything is just brutal. And you get three different perspectives. You get the perspective of the mother. Her name is Selma. And you get the perspective of the daughter. I want to say the daughter's name is Gorkum. I can't quite remember for sure. I think it's something like Gorkum. And then I would say bizarrely, you get a third perspective of a neighbor who is best friends with Selma's husband, who has left the lodgeman. Nobody knows where he is. And that's the inciting incident of this book. So the husband, can't remember his name now, goes, which is not uncommon for him. They got in a fight. He's like taken off for a couple of days, but it starts turning into longer and longer and longer. And we start to understand that Selma has never really wanted to be a mother. She treats her children very poorly. She's very neglectful of them because she doesn't want to be a mother. She thinks that they have taken something from her, and she is now like a shell of the person that she once was and who she wants to be. And she blames them for that. She has a daughter, Gorkum, a younger son after that, and then she's just had a baby at the very beginning of the novel as well. Gorkum's perspective is she hates Selma. She hates her, and has very violent thoughts towards her mother. They really parallel each other in a lot of ways, which I did think was an interesting thing about the novel. So mother and daughter, very similar to each other and have deep hate for one another. And the husband was sort of the glue that kept the family together. So without him, things are kind of tearing apart at the seams. Now you also have this neighbor perspective, which you only get a couple glimpses from his perspective, and they're very short when you do. And that I wasn't totally sold on. I understand plot-wise why we needed to have it, but I couldn't see beyond moving the plot forward why it was there. So I had a little bit of a problem with that. If you have a better understanding of it, please let me know. But yeah, he is maybe supposed to represent like a more typical type of person, like much more empathetic, kind, is really like foiling them in some way. And yeah, it's just following them trying to survive while the husband is gone and they're waiting for him to come back. Again, brutal throughout. I thought the writing was great. I thought the atmosphere was great. I liked the layering of the themes that was going on. The one thing about this book I didn't like was just the content. The content was not for me. I would definitely read from the author again. Like I said, I think it was really smart writing. I really enjoyed the writing itself, but the content was just not for me, and that's okay. The ending, I won't talk about what it is, but I don't totally buy it, is what I'll say. Like, I don't know if the book earned that ending. And I understand kind of conceptually what it adds to the book, but I don't think it earned it. And ultimately that kind of left it feeling like, okay, this was a good, not great for me. It's mostly to do with the content. That's not the author's fault, but did have a few questions about the book. So that was Lodgeman. All right, next book. I went to some lighter things because the combination of reading Hamnet and Lodgeman at the same time, which I was reading them at the same time, and that broke me. It broke my spirit, and not in a good way. Not in a like I had the best cry, I feel emotionally purged. It was a struggle to get through them both at the same time. So I went to something light, and I went to the Tea Dragon Tapestry by K. Oneill. It's published by Oneill Press. This is the third in the Tea Dragon series, which is such a lovely series. It is so like happy, heartwarming. There's some of the art style. And like I said, this is the third in the collection. I really enjoyed this one. I felt like this might even be my favorite. The first one and this one are very close in my mind. And yeah, I was just so happy to be back in this world, to be with these little lovely tea dragons, and see the two female characters in this who are growing up really come into their own. They're starting to make big decisions about their futures, and I really enjoyed it. So highly, highly recommend if you haven't checked this out before. Also, look at the end papers. How adorable. Oh my god. Love it. And this is a fantastical world in which tea dragons, which are little dragons like this that grow tea on their back. This is chamomile, so that's why she's very sleepy. And they're handlers, guardians. I don't remember what exactly they call themselves, but yeah, they kind of adopt the tea dragon, and the dragons are going to live much longer than them, but they have a very strong bond to one another, and it's so good. Absolutely loved it. And I'm sad that series is over because that was the end, but adored it. Next up, I read The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil by Stephen Collins, and this is a picture book that I thought was really good and has this interesting relationship to Prophet Song now that I think about it. But it's about this land called Here, and it is an island that's very orderly. Everything is pristine. Everybody is very well groomed. No chaos. And outside of the borders of Here is There, which is where all the chaos lives, and everybody is very afraid of it. And one day, the main character of our book, he starts growing a beard uncontrollably, and it cannot be stopped. And it introduces all this chaos to a place that has none, and we see the ramifications from there. I thought it was lovely. It was such an interesting take on this type of story. I loved the way that it ended. It was very unexpected. And yeah, it's about the idea of belonging and conformity, and how if you're experiencing that in an extreme, it's very problematic, and you really do need balance in order for things to work. So yeah, highly recommend. It was fantastic, and the art was wonderful. It's all done in black and white, but it's very, very beautiful art. Next up, we have another book that I loved. There were so many in here that I loved, and that is The Center by Ayesha Manazar Siddiqi. And this one has been all over. It came out in 2023, and it's about a language institute that's very exclusive and private. And supposedly at this language institute, you can become fluent in 10 days in any language that you want. And not just fluent, but like a native speaker fluent. Our main character gets told about this institute from a guy that she's dating at the time. You're only allowed to tell one person about the institute. So he tells her, and she decides to go. She goes to learn German, and there's this mystery throughout the novel of how this is possible to learn a language in 10 days and as well as they learn it. And she is also having a lot of curiosity about how the process works. She doesn't quite understand it, but she wants to, and she keeps digging to find out more. And you're going on that journey with her. It's very fascinating, but this also has so much to do with colonialism and how language plays a role in colonialism. That was really fascinating. It also talks a lot about relationships and the different types of relationships that we have in our lives, and how relationships can sort of be the making of us and the undoing of us. Really, really interesting. There's just so many things going on here, and it's almost like you would think that the book is tackling too much, but it finds a way to do it that all feels integrated and makes sense. Nothing felt out of place here. I just thought it was so intriguing. I kept wanting to figure out the mysteries myself within this novel, and yeah, I thought it had a lot of really profound things to say about the human experience, and I loved it. I would highly, highly recommend. I can't wait to see what this author writes next because I enjoyed it so much. And next up we have a very backlist book for me, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is published by Washington Square Press, and this is my first Taylor Jenkins Reid. I bought this had to be over 5 years ago from a thrift store, which like back in the day, that's where I used to buy most of my books. I don't really do that anymore. That's a whole other conversation that we could get into. But I picked this up, over 5 years ago. It's been on my shelves ever since. Of course, I've heard tons of people talk about this, but I wasn't sure if it really matched what I was wanting to read nowadays, because my reading tastes have changed somewhat. But I read this as a buddy read with my friend Kat again. We've been on a buddy reading journey so far this year, and this was such an interesting experience. So this book is very well known and beloved, and it's going to be made into a film later this year, I think, which is also partly why we were interested in reading it. And this is about Hollywood starlet from the 60s, I think, starting in the 50s and going all the way up into the 80s. And she is a very like Marilyn Monroe type, but she is Cuban. She has blonde hair. She's often known for wearing green, like in the photo in the back. And yeah, you're just following her journey into stardom. But there's also this framing device where you're in the present tense when she's older, and there is a journalist who is writing about her story. I don't want to give anything away with that, but so you flit in and out between like flashbacks, which are the main part of the book, and it's talking about the 7 husbands that she's had over her lifetime, and it's broken up by husband. But then at the end of each section, you get a present day portion about her and the journalist, and that's got its own narrative going on. The first 100 to 125 pages of this, I was worried. I was really worried, and I was thinking about DNFing it, mostly because I felt like it was very stereotypical and very surface level, and I was really struggling with that. Then it started to shift away from that. So there's something that happens if you read it, it starts to shift away from that, and I started to become more invested. The last 75 pages of this I thought were fantastically written. So it was so interesting to me, of like really disliking the beginning, really loving the end. The middle I thought was good. I thought this had some really good quotes in it that felt very relatable. just acutely observed, and I really enjoyed that. This is a book where I think the sentence structure itself makes it extremely readable, and I do think that is a skill. That is definitely a skill, to be able to have something flow in the way that it does here. And this did a really good job of like wrapping up all of the plot points. It tied them all together at the end. You didn't feel like there were a bunch of loose ends. I think that's a skill for how much was going on here. Looking back at the beginning, I was trying to see if it was maybe intentional, that was more stereotypical and surface level, like we were supposed to go on that journey. But reflecting back on it, even if that was intentional, I don't think that that was the correct subject matter to do it with. So I still stand by like the beginning. I think I have some problems with, but yeah, overall I really enjoyed this, and this emotionally devastated me in the good way. I cried at least 5 times. At least 5 times. So somebody please tell me how I did not cry a single time in this. And I cried 5 times in this. Like, this had the emotional investment that I wanted this book to have, and I applaud it for that. Like, it freaking got me. And not like just from being sad, like sometimes from being happy. That says a lot about an author's skill in writing. And yeah, I get why so many people love this. I think I might like the movie even better than the book, and I'm really looking forward to the movie, so can't wait for that to come out. Enjoyed this and would recommend it. And last up, I really just want to quickly say, I don't normally talk about my DNFs on the channel unless they're like scheduled in a specific video, like a vlog that I'm showing, but I do just want to quickly say that I did pick up The Latinist. This was from my book haul revisit for January, so I needed to read it in February. I did pick it up. I read like 62 pages, and I'm DNFing it, and I'll be getting rid of it. I'll go back into the little free library from which it came. This is a retelling of Daphne and Apollo, and it takes place in Oxford, I think. Yeah, at Oxford. I'm DNFing this for a couple of reasons. One, the way that it does the Daphne and Apollo retelling, it like takes all of the tension out of the book. Even if you know it's a retelling, so like you probably generally know what's going to happen, you never know how far a book is going to stray from the retelling, so you can still go into it like not completely knowing. But this book at the very beginning, it basically gives you a summarized version of the myth, so it's like freshly placing it in your mind, and then starts to exactly follow that synopsis that it gave you. And I found that really frustrating, because typically, even if you know something ahead of time, I think a lot of times if it's done well, it's to build tension, right? You know something's coming, so you feel tense leading up to it. But this just took all of that away and made me feel frustrated. Like, I'm just so annoyed. Like, I know what's gonna happen. Like, we just need to get there. Like, the characters are being so dumb and not realizing what's gonna happen. So I was just frustrated. And then the other piece of this that I didn't love is that it goes into way too much detail about some of the things that they're studying. So the characters in this, one is in graduate school. She's looking for a job, getting out of her PhD, and then her mentor, who's a professor at Oxford, it talks way too in depth about the research that they're doing. I just have no interest in that level of depth on that. It seems like the author trying to like show like, look at all this like knowledge I have about these topics, when like I don't think we need that for this story. I don't think it's necessary at all, and it's just bogging it down. So I was like finding myself, I was like, God, I want to skim, and I never want to skim, so I'm just putting it down. So that is The Latinist. Didn't work for me, but we tried it. I wanted you to know that I had attempted it since I was supposed to read it, and we'll see what's up next for the month of March. So thank you all for watching. I'm happy to be back talking with you all about these books. If you read any of them, let me know what you thought. I had a lot of ups and downs these past couple of months. So yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.